Hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Good, Ashu. Thank you. Good to be here.
I think legal tech, the kind of work which is happening, right? And I think the sensitivity that we have as a country around, what's happening in our courts and our judicial system, right? I think these are very, very interesting times for legal tech, and that makes our discussion very, very important and exciting and critical at the same time, right? And I am particularly looking forward to discussing, some great work that you've been doing at, within your startup.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashu. I'm excited about it too.
Madan, before we start our discussion, right? Before we dive into our discussion on Mancorp, it'd be lovely for us to know a little about you. If you could run us through your background, that'd be a great starting point, and then we dive into the specifics.
Sure, sure.
Sure.
So to give you a little background about myself, Ashu, I've been a professional tennis player growing up. I've grown up in Middle East and traveled and studied across the world. I went to study hospitality management in Switzerland at La Roche University, and I soon realized that I wanted to do something with public policy and something to do with global, like a planetary management. So I moved to La Roche, Chicago, to study sustainability. There, I had the opportunity to work with the mayor of City of Chicago and the CEO of the City of Chicago to brand the city of Chicago as a sustainable city, also while planning their energy hybrid energy grid system and their new transit systems that they were coming out with that time.
Mhm.
And this gave me a really great insight into how government and governance works, which really intrigued me and wanted me to pursue more in that direction,
Right.
which shifted me a little from sustainability.
Right.
And that's where I applied to Harvard to study theoretical sustainability, applying the concepts of quantitative and qualitative analysis and
Right.
impact assessment to actually identify what is and what isn't sustainable.
Mhm. Great.
And there, after learning some methodologies and implementing some policies, I
Right.
realized that these methods are not actually just useful for governance, but also as a business practice. It
Right.
is extremely important for a business to understand what their impact is
Right.
and how they can maneuver their impact in whatever way possible.
Hmm. Very interesting. Uh, and I think that's a lot of sustainability, right? And I think in today's time, and I think what we've gone through, I think sustainability is something which has become so much more relevant, right? And I think the conversations are becoming more relevant, they're becoming much sharper, and I think they'll possibly be part of what we do in future, right? I think they're going to be at the core of each decision, each business decision that we sort of take and make, right? And of course, policy. And I
That's
think
right.
we see that sustainability. Sensitivity. Manthan, we're going to move into our discussion on Matpop, right? There's some very interesting work that you're doing, right? You're making our courts smarter and more intelligent, right? You're making information which usually exists in silos, right? Which kind of makes the process, longish, brings in a lot of laggards in the process. You're making it very, very efficient, right? So tell us that facet of what you're solving at Mancorp.
So first and foremost, Ashu, I'd like to mention that with courts and with the justice delivery system, one of the biggest problems that we see across the world, that is not just in India, unique to India, but across the world, is that there is a huge shortage of the manpower required to
Right.
actually cater to the entire justice delivery system, no matter what country it is. In India, the statistic is the highest in the world, as I recall. Uh, but again, so this is a problem which is common in all justice delivery systems. India is not unique here. It is just that the quantum is much larger, which is directly proportional to the population size over here. Uh, and the problem that we're trying to solve here is specifically around assisting the judges in preparing for the cases that are listed in front of them. So we've devised a smart AI chatbot system which can basically read an entire paper book at a speed of lightning speed of 10 million characters per second.
Mm-hmm.
It can read this information and decipher any sort of key information required by the judges to prepare for the case. To give you an example, it is important for a judge in a criminal matter to
Right.
know, for example, which accused caused which injury on the body of the victim.
Sure.
Now, this is an information a judge can get only once he has an in-depth read of the
Mhm.
entire paper book from multiple
Right.
areas and cross verify and cross validate this information. So
Right.
this is the process that our system does for them, and provides them at a voice command. So judges today, using our system, could simply ask, what was the overt act of each accused party in the case,
Mhm.
and the system would automatically fetch this answer for them, and also identify from which part of the document did the AI fetch the answer. So the judge does not necessarily have to rely upon the answers generated by the AI, but can
Mhm.
make an informed decision much faster and in a more efficient way.
Very interesting. Manthan, how large is the landscape, right? I mean, all of us know that there are many, many cases that are pending, right? How large is this thing, right? I mean, are you solving for a particular issue right now? So, for example, say commercial law, right? Now, the output is very, very definitive, right? But as soon as you say meander into, or look at, aspects of, say, for example, criminal law and, and civil matters and so on and so forth, right? There are many facets to it, right? There are many stakeholders to it, right? And it just becomes so much more complicated, right? Reference to law again becomes a very complex part, right? Because of course, we don't have a one unified legal system, right? We have multiple legal systems, right? And we continue to sort of operate within that complex environment, right? How does that take shape?
So precisely, because as you pointed out, we don't operate under one legal system. There are essentially multiple layers of the legal system in which we
Sure.
operate, which is
Mm-hmm.
where AI becomes very, very effective. When right now we're at a very preliminary stage where we see our system being implemented in one or two courts only.
Sure.
Looking 5 years or 10 years down the line, when I imagine that this kind of a technology will be widespread,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is supplied through us or by any other party. But when this technology becomes widespread, what it allows you to do is to monitor and identify differences and consistencies
Mm-hmm.
between these different legal systems and try to evolve some of these areas of legal aspects. So, as you may know, one of the biggest objectives of any legal system, including our current government, also is to repeal some of the irrelevant laws that exist and that sort of create obstacles for doing business in the country
Right.
or just for living in the country. So having intelligent systems like this will make it more efficient and less time consuming to identify these areas of law
Right.
and to start standardizing and to start making the legal system consistent across multiple layers, no matter where you are approaching. One country, one law is the direction that we can actually achieve if we have these systems in place.
Interesting. Manthan, you had some success in building a very strong relationship with certain courts, right? Right. I mean, there are certain progressive courts, and then of course there are certain courts that priorities are very different, right? And tech is not necessarily something which is say as ubiquitous, right? It's not. I mean, there are times, right, in terms of say adoption, right? Tell us a little more about that journey, right? I mean, you've been able to establish, your solution across many many courts, right? How has that journey been?
So, Ashu, it's been uh, a very tedious journey, but a very remarkable journey indeed. So, as I said, we started our journey with the expression of interest that was floated by the Jharkhand High Court,
Sure.
seeking for smart court solution
Right.
and helping judges in decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we came out with a solution of two-phase solution, one of OCR, which is optical character recognition, to convert their scanned images into computer readable text,
Mm-hmm.
without which AI is impossible. And the second step was helping them with a chatbot.
Right.
So a chatbot assistive tool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this system was one of a kind system that was introduced in 2019 at the Jharkhand High Court. First and second phase were delivered,
Right.
and soon after that, the Supreme Court realized that there is a lot of potential with similar systems or the same system be scaled to other areas of law.
Right.
And so Supreme Court in 2019 formed an AI committee
Mm-hmm.
to explore the usage of AI technology in various facets of justice delivery system.
Okay.
And so we discussed various bottlenecks and identified how technology could intervene to
Mm-hmm.
solve or to basically resolve those bottlenecks.
Right.
Thereabout, where we did multiple pilots, in various high courts, which included digitization pilots, which included pilots of management and administrative work, which included pilots of clerical work, and also the work of filing division or registry. Even, for example, some judicial processes were piloted.
Right.
So we did multiple pilots with multiple high courts. Now, the reason we did this is because, as you rightly mentioned, India works with multiple legal system, and even with every state that you go to, the format of document will be different. The formats of the content will be different. It might be the same legal code, but the way in which the case itself evolves is very different
Mm-hmm.
in these different jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
So we did multiple pilots in multiple courts. Now today, India has an AI committee in every high court of the state, of
Mm-hmm.
every state. So that's the stage at which we are, where India is seriously looking at implementing AI technologies across their justice delivery system, trying to solve the issue of pendency, trying to resolve the issue of shortage of judges,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to bring about more consistencies and more intelligence to justice delivery.
Very interesting. Manthan, I have a question on the product, right? And more in the current form, right? Now, given that we have this disparity, right? Between how courts operate, right? How is so for example, does the data that's collected, right, or which is registered, right, does it exist in its own independent silo, or is it pooled at a across, say, a data lake, which is now becoming a good reference repository for each institution, right? And not just, say, for example, to institutions within just the judicial or the judiciary, right? But many other stakeholders, right? Who are potentially, say, for example, getting into newer business relationships. They can understand disputes and stuff like that, right? So how is that coming together, right? Is this coming together in one form and way? Tell us a little more about that side of the business.
So there are aspects of data that are coming in one central pool,
Sure.
which can be witnessed also in the National Judicial Data Grid,
Okay.
a great initiative done by the NIC, which is National Informatics Center of India.
Right.
And similar activities are being done where even judgments and orders being passed by every high court is being collected by a central pool.
Mhm.
But at the same time, because this is a highly sensitive area of work,
Right.
and has carries a lot of sensitive data and sensitive information, sensitive documents. Each high court, or each court for that matter, has its own data center,
Mhm.
where all of all of the data resides.
Mhm.
Now it does not actually get outside of these areas unless it's a public document.
All right.
So things such as judgments or orders are public documents, where if they are
Mhm.
publicly reportable or not
Right.
depends on that.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting, and I think that's a relevant point that you highlighted there. Manthan, what is the way forward, right? How do you see the product evolving? We've had a discussion about this, right? You've highlighted aspirations, right, in terms of how do you want to sort of take the product forward, shape the product. But I'd love to hear it from you, for many people who want to watch this, right? In terms of how do you visualize the future for Mancorp?
So for Mancorp, the way I visualize the future is that we'd like to bring AI-powered technology to all professionals who work at a desk job. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you have AutoCAD for architects, you have Tally for Tally for accountants.
Correct.
But when you go to professionals like lawyers, you really don't have a one-stop solution or a platform that you can call it. This is my tool, this is my professional necessity. So we'd like to create a tool like that to basically allow lawyers and other professionals who work with documents and other files
Sure.
to have something to go to. So that's
And
where the direction we see for now.
any particular products that we would see, any particular features that we would see coming up in the next, say, couple of months? What's the work which is happening on that front?
So in the next couple of months, we are soon coming out with a product for lawyers
Mm-hmm.
and for corporates, which is called Jury.
Right.
This is going to be launched at a beta stage where we are just inviting people, where we are inviting people to try our product,
Sure.
to give us feedback so that we can improve the offerings
Right.
and improvise on what we've already worked on. So this is something that you'll see coming soon in another month or two at most.
Sure. So very interesting. Manthan, this is a question which is, you're a technology company, right? And when you're talking about any technology company, right? Uh, it by default sort of operates within the, say, within the fraternity of, say, venture capital, right? Investments, so on and so forth, right? One thing which has happened with legal tech, right? And this is slightly more macro question, right? One thing which has happened with legal tech is that we've not seen a lot of investment go into legal tech, right? And that is largely because people have been uncertain in terms of the size of the market, right? I mean, while it's a large size, right, but a lot of that happens in a private setting, right? These are not necessarily documented numbers, right? Which does not gives a very significant visual in terms of how large the market can be. But what's your sense on that, right? How large is that market, right, that you're operating in currently? How do you dissect the market?
So, roughly speaking, the legal tech market in India is somewhere close to a $20 billion market.
Mhm.
You have about 20 2 million plus 2 million plus lawyers registered with the Bar Council of India. This is again an outdated number. This number keeps changing. You have almost the equivalent number of people working as paralegals or law researchers or law clerks
Mhm.
who are not traditionally qualified lawyers but still work in this space.
Right.
You have lawyers who are qualified but are not registered with the Bar Council.
Mhm.
So you have a substantial amount of number of people who are in this fraternity, and it's a really huge market size. Now, really depending on who is it that you're catering to. So if you're catering to law firms and lawyers, as we intend to,
Mhm.
the market size is considerably small because the legal industry in India is a little on the back foot on using the latest of the technologies. There are hardly 3 or 4% of the entire people from the entire community who are up to date and use literally everything that is or anything new that comes in the market. So
Right.
that is one sort of backlash or say sort of a negative feedback that we get from investors when we speak about legal tech industry.
Mhm.
But at the same time, when we talk about corporates and we talk about legal professionals who work in corporates and companies, there's a huge potential and a huge market for this area, especially if you start looking into specialized areas as well. So
Mhm.
now there are new companies coming out in legal practice management.
Right.
Some good companies to name are companies like Pro Vakil, who are doing
Mhm.
a fabulous job in legal practice management.
Right.
If you look at legal research, just to give a few names, SCC Online or Manupatra, they're doing a fabulous job when it comes to legal research.
Right.
Uh, so there are people who are doing specialized work in specialized areas of work in the legal fraternity, but most of them are either self-funded or are very old companies who were already operating in the pre-digitization phase of the
Right.
legal fraternity and are
Mhm.
providing digitized services now to them. So you rightly pointed out, yes, there is sort of a conservative sentiment when it comes to investing in legal tech, but
Right.
I think that is soon to change with the times to come.
Very interesting. Manthan, I mean, that naturally leads me to a question, right? Is that, if there is, say, a reservation around investing, typically you have to either sort of, kind of evangelize the cause and basically fund that cost, right? Till it gets to a point where, there are people who get excited about it and investors who get, you know, kind of, get excited about the overall possibility, right, of the legal tech market, right? Um, in an environment like that, right? Uh, how do you operate, right? I mean, how are the cash flows, right? Is this? I mean, if it's a SaaS, right? How are you pricing it? Given, is this like an instant-based pricing that you're doing? Is this a larger pricing that you're doing for a larger quote or something? How is that play? Yeah, I mean, basically, you essentially, your revenues have to kick in, right? So what I want to essentially understand is, how is your revenue strategy playing out? Right? Is that enough for you to cover, a lot of effort that has gone into building this? How is that scenario looking?
So to answer your question, the first question that you asked, how we are operating in this kind of a situation.
Sure.
Uh, stressfully, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's a stressful situation. Try not being able to get investors, not being able to get raise the amount of funding required to run such a heavy duty operation that we do.
Sure.
Now, keeping that point aside, we as a company we see that B2G, there are two or three types of markets that we see in the legal tech.
Right.
One is a B2G market, which we are known for as Mancorp, right? Because we've done work with some courts, including the Supreme Court of India. So, especially in B2G markets, the revenue source is usually on per page basis, because
Right.
the government understands that you are scanning one document, what the scanning cost is, or
Right.
we are processing one application, what that cost of one application is, or how many applications can be processed by a single individual in that machinery of filing a case or whatever. So we can price it on per page basis or per case basis when it comes to B2G clientele. When we talk about B2B and B2C, we are essentially talking about subscription modules.
Right.
Now, we are still at a very early stage right now for me to reveal what that subscription value is going to be per user.
Right.
But it's going to be a subscription value that I can assure is going to be affordable,
Right.
uh, and essentially in the same ranges, if not cheaper than what the technologies currently people are using already.
Very
So we
interesting.
want to fit in that same bracket.
Sure. Manthan, given a large part of your work happens in the B2G segment, right? Now, when it comes to government side engagements, right? Government essentially, there's a certain system that the government follows, right? In terms of accepting an application, right, and dealing with a certain setup and all of that, right? There are two primary concerns. One is, of course, how you get in, right? That's number one, because it's a very extremely competitive environment, right? And I think there is a massive pressure on the government to operate neutrally, which I think is also right, because it's eventually taxpayers' money, right? So transparency is very, very important, and I think they continue to improve that ecosystem. Second is, when it comes to revenues, right, from the government, right? And I think one common thesis which goes around is that once you get into government business, it's a great business to be in because you get a very large volume to deal with, but simultaneously payments take a lot of time. There could be, that could be a challenge, right? Which just makes it, a little difficult to kind of build a thesis or an anticipation in terms of how this business going to look like, say next few years, right? What are your thoughts about that, right? I mean, are those challenges that you deal with as an organization? Are those challenges that your stakeholders talk to you about? How do you look at these two aspects?
I totally agree with you here, Ashu. I mean, this has been by far one of the biggest challenges that we as a company has been facing. I mean,
Sure.
especially as a startup,
Hmm.
cash flow is one of the most important, if not the most important thing
Sure.
in the company. And yes, government payments are not timely in nature. And it is a heavy duty operation to be able to maintain relationships and to be able to continue delivering projects to the government without having payments necessarily done in time. But at the same time, what we believe is that it's a huge volume market,
Right.
and although the competition is tough, there are a handful of competitors who actually get the work awarded from a government.
Hmm.
And so, if you are an innovative company who believes that the government actually wants to do innovation and wants to appreciate innovation, then I believe it's just about keeping faith in the government entities and serving a first couple of years, spending your time into understanding their requirements, understanding their ways of working,
Right.
as compared to traditionally, like how into B2B or B2C market, you release your product, it doesn't work for 1 year, you shut off your company.
Right.
That's not the same when it goes to government. You have
Right.
to give it time, you have to give them time, you have to give yourself time
Mhm.
to really understand, to really build a relationship, and to understand how we are best fit for each other.
Right.
So that takes a high cash burn, which again, the investors in India are not necessarily very happy about.
Hmm.
But at the same time, if someone puts in the right faith, it is a great space to be in, because there is a huge amount of innovation that can be done in the government space. And as you mentioned, I mean, there is obviously revenue after you cross a certain stage.
Interesting. Manthan, one question that I have for you, right, is that when you're doing, when you're operating in a B2G environment as well, right? there's not necessarily a lot that one is doing on the brand side of things, right? But given your aspiration to sort of enter a B2C, which is essentially also, which could be law firms, which could be large corporates, which could be, people essentially who are using this, the repository of information that you're building, right, and the analysis and intelligence that you're building, right. Eventually, in their future contracts, and essentially ensuring that they have the right, safeguards, right, when they're getting into any commercial contract or whatever, right. Uh, how I mean, what's your thought process on that as a founder, right? How are you? Is there something that you're doing on brand creation, right? While you, of course, you continue to work on the B2G segment, right? Because that is going to be very, very important foundationally when you enter the B2B segment, right? When you start offering your SaaS product to many, many corporates, many other law firms, right? What is happening on that front?
So on B2B and B2C front, we have already started onboarding various firms and independent users to start testing our product.
Okay.
And we've been getting some great feedback and suggestions as to things that we had thought about, things that we hadn't thought about,
Right.
and that we are improving every day in a product.
Mhm.
So there is a constant effort of a to and fro sort of a review mechanism that goes on between the user and the developers right now.
Right.
And this will continue on until we enter the market in the B2B and B2C segment.
Mhm.
So that when we enter, the product is actually ready by an international standard, and not just something that a small company has built and is there for you to use as a service.
So what's the effort on branding which is going in, right? I mean, have you started to sort of do that, or is this something that you'll start to possibly do once you get to a final release of the product?
I believe branding is the thing that we started first, even before the product development. Branding follows vision,
Sure.
and the vision has already always been clear. We are trying to build a co-working AI-powered collaborative platform for professionals, right? And that has been the key aspect of every feature that we add into the platform, every service that we choose to provide or choose to eliminate goes around this branding statement
Mhm.
and this vision statement as to what it is that we're trying to do. So Judy, in fact, stands for judicious intelligence,
Okay.
and we started working on this before we even thought that we were going to work for the judiciary.
Mhm.
Uh, so yes, so branding is a very important aspect as a company to us. Design, branding. These are very important for especially in today's time. You can't just have a
Right.
good product, you need to have a good brand in order to have loyal customers.
Interesting. Manthan, I'm going to move on to a very significant and important question, right? I think 2020 is something that just touched each one of us, right? At a personal level, at a professional level, right? And something that we've seen across businesses is, while they continue to, defer costs, right, or cost centers, um, uh, and essentially focused on revenue centers. We've seen a huge surge in terms of technology product, right? Right. While you're not out there, necessarily selling in a current environment, right? You're still in that phase where you're, kind of collaborating, working, and building. Uh, how has that relationship changed, right? Do you see a very different kind of an engagement today? Are they more open to, talking and building a solution, helping you build the right solution which suits their requirement? And also the fact that, is there a fair understanding that people have that the business ecosystem has changed, right? The risks are very, very different, and that essentially means that you'll have to, kind of ring fence yourself in a very different way. And legally you have to be very, very differently covered, right, from how it happened earlier. The markets are going to be far more dynamic, right? So, what do you gather from the market, right? What's the momentum in the market, right?
Right.
Which of course also means that, as you go forward, it's going to be a very different landscape for you from a consumer adoption standpoint, right? What's been the sense on that?
So since the advent of pandemic in 2020, there has been, as you rightly mentioned, there has been a surge in the willingness to adopt technology. There has also been a surge in actually adoption of technology. And as a company that we have seen that there is definitely a huge uh, uh, change in the degree of acceptance that people have towards technologies like ours. So
Mm-hmm.
pre 2020, one of the biggest issues that we used to face while actually sort of throwing our ideas around in the market
Sure.
or talking to people was that this is never going to be successful. Lawyers are never going to use systems like this. We are always going to keep working traditionally, and we won't
Right.
use anything that is going to sort of replace us. And we've come from that stage to today. We've come to a place where we need a system where we can work remotely.
Right.
We need a system that can help us track what the other person is doing.
Got it.
We need a system that can automate small, simple tasks that we would otherwise do in the office. But now that we're not in the office, I want
Right.
it ready made in front of my hands. So there has been this transition without the customer realizing that they've already transitioned there. But as a company, we are always in the mode of having a conversation and anticipating
Right.
as to which emotional or sentimental stage the consumer is in, so that we provide those features and only those features to them, to as to not to overwhelm them with
Mm-hmm.
more things, and also to provide them things where it hurts them the most, right? So solving the biggest pain points, which today are of actually working remotely and working in collaboration. This has become one of the biggest issues today.
Very interesting. Manthan, what are the next 2 years like, right? What's keeping you and your team excited, right? Of course, you've mentioned about duty, but what are the kind of numbers that you're chasing in the next 2 years?
So in the next 2 years, we hope to be there in at least half of the states in the country. Speaking
Mhm.
about B2G,
Sure.
half of the states of the country, we would like to, we like our technology to be there in courts and justice delivery system.
Hmm.
Speaking about B2B and B2C, we are hoping that we can capture at least 1% of the entire legal market in the country,
Right.
right? And that's a success for us. If we get 1% in the next 2 years, that's great. Over the next 5 years after that, we would like to get to 2%, and maybe like to then provide a version where we can spread to almost everyone possible. But
Interesting.
that really depends on people, and it's not dependent on companies like us.
Interesting. Manthan, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, right? I think with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, I think it's just so much more needed, right? I think justice delivery system needs to ramp up. We need to increase our speed, right? Something we've kind of talked about for many, many years. I mean, of course, there are policy issues that need, a deeper discussion, more intervention, right? But I think the current government and its current uh, I think they're kind of prioritizing, this entire framework, and I think they understand the sensitivity that is required to have, judicial system which is fast, quick, and can kind of relieve pain, right, which exists in the economy, right, and eventually what people go for is judiciary. And I think you're playing a very critical role. Manthan, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, Ashu. Thank you so much.